Ex-homeless people of Reddit, where did you go during the day? Story 1. I worked at a video store in a mall. I would use the employee-only bathroom in the mall to wash my clothes in the sink after hours. That job was the only thing that gave me a reason to hope for the future back then. To this day, I don't think any of my coworkers had any idea I was homeless while I was working there. On my days off, I would walk down to an abandoned house I knew about and squat in the upstairs part of the house during winter. I had a small microwave someone had thrown away. I had cleaned it up and fixed its power supply with some wiring I was able to buy from Radio Shack back when they sold things like that. I was able to use an extension cord to plug a power strip into the back of the neighboring house's garage. I don't think they ever noticed it. I had accumulated a few small creature comforts in that house. A camping lamp that plugged in for light. A small space heater someone threw out next to a dumpster. I was amazed to find it still worked. I would stay in one of the inner bedrooms with a boarded-up window I had sealed with plastic sheeting. Even with the light on, you couldn't see it from the outside. The house was on a rundown property that was all locked and boarded up. I got in by climbing a tree in the backyard and using a large branch to crawl across to an unlocked window on the second floor. I was paranoid, so I would always make sure no one was ever around before approaching the property. I survived 2 winters in that abandoned house. I always worried someone who owned the property would show up one day while I was there, but no one ever did. I don't drink, and never did drugs, or any of the other trappings that homeless people fall into. I also was too embarrassed about my situation to make any friends or hang out with anyone, so for that period of my life, I was pretty much a hermit. I didn't socialize with anyone. Eventually, I was able to change my circumstances. I was able to get a better job. I also lucked into a roommate situation in a pretty nice apartment. Not exactly rags to riches or anything, but a great deal of an improvement. That roommate ended up becoming one of my closest friends and eventually was the best man at my wedding. I'm now 40 years old, happily married for 13 years with a full-time job. I have often thought about driving down to see if that house is still there, but I am content to leave that part of my life in the past. Edit. Holy people, thank you for the gold, kind strangers. I was fully expecting this to get buried. I normally never bring up this part of my life. I guess just seeing someone ask the question made me come back to it. Is someone cutting onions in here? People keep asking for more of an explanation, so I answered someone in a comment below this. I'm copy-pasting it here so you don't have to go looking for it. Many of you have also suggested I write a book. I have never written a book or much else for that matter. After getting so much positive feedback, I am now considering the idea. I have a lot to think about now. Edit. Update on the advice of many people, and with the help of some friends I tracked down the girl that helped get me off the streets. I have since messaged her on social media, and we are in communication. I let her know how much she helped me and thanked her. She seemed very nonchalant about the whole thing. She reminded me of a bunch of things I had forgotten about over the years. Lots of old memories. I asked her how she's been over the years, and she has sadly had it pretty rough herself. She currently owns and runs an animal shelter that is not doing very well financially, always the one to help strays, I guess. I have decided to start writing. I don't know if it will become a book or just my rambling thoughts, but I'm going to give it my best effort. I will update again if it goes anywhere. Work. I was homeless, but not jobless. Story 2. I just want to say something about what it is like being homeless. To answer your question quickly, the days are easy. You carry on as normal, go to the gym, study, work, normal things you always do out. It is the nights that are hard. I was homeless for a very short period of time, and only spent one night outside in that period in a woods. I'm good at shelters. You feel worthless. The episode in Breaking Bad when Jesse is homeless in one of the early seasons shows it really well. Lots of your friends say you can stay over, but don't actually offer. So what I want to say is, if you have a friend end up in a similar situation to me, insist they stay at yours. Don't offer, insist. It removes the horrible part in their brain that makes them feel like a parasite or lazy or worthless, and instead like an equal friend, and that is really, really important at times like that. Story 3. Work. I got out of an abusive relationship and was not in contact with my family, but I managed to maintain a job at a YMCA. I was able to shower and stuff there and more or less hide that I was sleeping in my car or the occasional friend's coworker's couch. I was extremely lucky though. Story 4. I had a friend who was homeless for years. He would surf couches at a lot of different people's apartments. He was also a student at the time and spent a lot of time at the University of Wisconsin library connected to Wi-Fi. Public libraries can be a good place if you're homeless. Story 5. During the day, I go to work. I had a full-time job as an accounting assistant, and a part-time job at Geek Squad. I had lost my job after working in a youth detention rehabilitation center. I was attacked, knocked on the head, let go for no calling no showing while on medical leave. Later found out they had put on the workers' comp forms that I hurt my toe, with a concussion and brain swelling. 5 years later, I have migraines a few times a week. Kind of effed that while doing everything right, one bad day can pretty much wreck everything. Story 6. Obligatory. Not I, but knew a kid who was homeless for pretty much a year and a half of college. He flunked out of a prestigious school. His rich father cut him off, wrecked his super once again rich father, couldn't pay his credit card, and somehow ended up at my not-so-Notre Dame University where he still had a few friends left over from high school close to his hometown. Moved in with some of these high school buddies. It didn't work out, they were pretty toxic. He also couldn't make his share of rent when the bills came along, so they booted him. Kid entered as a 22 years old sophomore. I met him in a freshman-level biology class. He got a job working in one of the school's older recreation facilities. The place was a ghost town. sat at a desk all day when he wasn't in class, made money while studying the day away and occasionally handing out racquetball court keys. He had his own lockers plural to put his stuff, free place to shower and work out, a university TV to watch, a computer at the desk to use, snacked on the protein bars and sports drinks off the shelf. Boss didn't care for food, and put up a BRB sign and walked across the street into a dorm complex where he did his laundry. He slept on couches, in the library, and even said racquetball courts in a pinch. He usually had a place to stay. I can attest he slept on my couch a couple of times. His half-brother came to our school the year after I met him, but lived in a freshman dorm. I think he slept on his futon as much as possible without getting caught by the RA. I sincerely think he voluntarily lived homeless after the first half year because he was trying to save up and get ahead, made enough money to get a place of his own, got financial aid and bills in line, even quit smoking for more saving. I graduated early and moved on. Found out he then knocked up his girlfriend and got right back into a financial hole. Eventually he got into med school, took the military scholarship the day he got accepted to med school and was finally 100 financially stable. He's doing great. Trauma surgeon saving soldiers' lives. I don't think he's proud of his story, he really up. I don't think too many people really knew him through this time. He was obviously quite a loner. It's a true riches to rags to riches fairy tale, insert Cinderella reference. The guy was always smart, he just made some dumb decisions. The same dumb decisions a lot of kids make that ruin or drastically change their lives. It took him years to get his GPA to a level where he could make it into professional school. He ended up staying for a master's degree to improve his CV. I must say he was persistent. Like others have said, there are resources at your disposal, use what you're dealt. And homeless doesn't mean dumb, poor, or jobless. Edit I can't grammar and clarification. Edit 2 filled in some more detail since people are asking. Story 7 Parks or the library. If I had free time, a lot of my time was spent waiting in line in soup kitchens, waiting for social services, waiting for laundry, waiting for day labor. If I had nothing else to do, and didn't feel like the humiliation of panhandling, I'd get a library book to read in a park or the library. I also had a smartphone, which while it didn't have phone service, I could still use to get online. I was a homeless Redditor once upon a time. Story 8 During the morning, I was doing job interviews and driving between counties depending on what day it was. During the afternoon, I would go to a local dollar theater and prepay for 3 or 4 showings of whatever movie wouldn't drive me insane, then sit in the farthest back corner with earplugs and in sleeping mask and sleep. Story 9 This is the first time that I have ever told this story to anyone. It's long, but it feels good to have written it out. I was 19 years old, and had moved cross-country to Philadelphia for a job. In retrospect there were a ton of red flags, but I was young and naive. I drove there, so I had my car, my clothes, and about 100 left in my pocket. The job came with housing, so I really only needed to worry about food. After a month I got my first paycheck, and went out to buy food and some of the things I needed. While I was out, I collapsed and woke up in the emergency room. I have a heart murmur and an infection had taken hold. I was hospitalized while put on a gamut of medications. When I was discharged, I went back to my apartment to find that the locks had been changed. Confused I called my director and he told me to come in. I went into the office and they had all my stuff there boxed up for me. I was told that they had replaced me because I was going to miss too much work. My director handed me a check for what was owed, basically nothing, and helped load my stuff into the car. I drove down the highway a bit and pulled into a rest stop, locked my car and cried myself to sleep. I didn't know what to do. I was across the country, had no support system, and no idea what to do. The check I was given was tiny, enough to eat off the dollar menu at McDonald's a few times. The next day I decided I was going to make the best of the situation and headed down and sold pretty much everything I owned at that point. I then went and bought some slacks, shoes, and a nice shirt for interviews. I figured I could live out of my car for a while once I had a job. Later that day I splurged on a cheap motel room, figuring a good night's rest would give me a better chance at my interviews. I went up, stored my stuff, and walked down the block to get something to eat. When I got back to my hotel room, the door was unlocked and just slightly open. With a sense of dread I opened the door to see that my worst suspicions were confirmed. I had been robbed, everything was gone. I had left my car keys in the room, they had found them and taken the car too. I was in a t-shirt and jeans with some sneakers on, that and the 5 in my pocket were all I had to my name now. I sat in my room stunned and spiraling quickly into a dark place. I filed a police report, but based on the officer's reactions I wasn't hopeful, realizing it might be my last chance to have a roof over my head. I barred the door and barely slept. The next morning I woke up and checked out with no idea what to do, so I just walked. That night I found a place that looked like it would work well, out of the way, hard to see. I figured I wouldn't be bothered. I was woken up by a hard kick to the head. There were 2 hobos there that also knew about the spot and weren't happy about me being there. They beat the out of me, took the last of my money, my shoes, and threw me out onto the street, thoroughly broken, depressed, and in despair I walked a bit and found a tree out of the way to climb into. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning I cleaned myself up as best I could in a washroom sink. I looked like black eye, no shoes, blood on my shirt and jeans. I had no idea what I was going to do next. For the next several weeks I kind of just drifted. They are a blur of increasing self-loathing, despair and depression. I found food here and there occasionally, but it was rare. I was caught in the dilemma of being hungry enough to want to steal food, and deathly afraid of jail prison time. Finally I decided I had enough. Game over, I wanted out. I couldn't take it anymore. I wandered until I found a bridge that looked like it would be high enough to get the job done. I walked up to the middle of the bridge and spent what felt like an eternity looking out over the horizon. In reality, it was probably only a couple of minutes. I was watching a guy on his morning walk. He was coming up over the bridge, so I decided to wait. There was no reason for me to scar that guy by making him watch me jump. I figured I would let him pass until he was out of sight, then do it. He walked past me, got about 10 feet down the other side of the bridge when he just stopped walking. He stood there for a few seconds, turned around and walked back up the bridge to where I was. He leaned onto the banister next to me and didn't say a thing for a minute. But I will never forget that man or that conversation. It literally saved my life. This is the conversation between him. I will call him Bob, and I. Bob, beautiful view, isn't it? Me grunt, Bob, are you okay? Me caught off guard, yeah, fine. Why, Bob, you don't seem okay, and well, you don't really look it either. Me, why would you care, Bob? Because everybody needs somebody, and life is just life, which means that sometimes a person just gets the end of the stick for no reason. Me, that about sums it up. Bob, you hungry? I was just heading home and was going to make some breakfast. Me, a bit incredulous at this point. Are you screwing with me? Who invites a random person to have breakfast with them? Especially, I gestured to my horrifically disheveled self. I mean, you don't know anything about me. I could be a rapist or murderer for all you know. Bob, are you a murderer? I mean, me no. Bob, a rapist? Me no. Bob, well, it's been a while since I got any. Me, stunned silence. Then I broke down laughing. And so did Bob. It was the first time I had laughed, or even cracked a smile in weeks. I agreed to go have breakfast with him. We walked to his house and bullshitted most of the way. Turns out that he had been a widower for the past 20 years or so. When we got inside, he told me he would start some breakfast, then told me I could use the shower. There is a magical humanizing power to a hot shower, my friend, he told me. While in the shower, Bob brought me a razor, new toothbrush, and a comb. I took a long hot shower, shaved, for the first time since I had been admitted to the hospital. When I got out of the shower, there was a shirt, pants, and belt next to my ratty clothing with a note: you can have these if you want them. They are probably a little big, but should work. I tried everything on, and while a little big, they mostly fit. When I left the bathroom, the smell of breakfast hit me full on. My stomach growled hungrily. When I got into the kitchen, I saw that Bob had gone all out. There was bacon, sausage, eggs, waffles, oatmeal, and fruit. I ate it all. After eating, we sat down in the living room. After a minute, Bob said simply, if you want to talk, I will listen. Everything that had happened to me welled up all at once and just started spilling out. I wept like I never had before or since. I told Bob everything that had happened from the move out forwards. The whole time he just listened, didn't talk at all, he just listened. When I finished, he told me that he walked past me and something inside stopped him, told him to turn around and ask him if he is okay, because he is not okay, and he is about to do something about it. Bob invited me to stay with him, and for the next month I did as I recovered. Bob only asked that I help with chores around the house, which I was more than happy to do. While staying there, I started thinking about what I was going to do. After discussing it at length with Bob, I landed on school. I wanted to learn to be a chef. It was always a dream of mine, but I had never gotten it together enough to actually go. The problem was, I had no money. How was I going to pay for it? So I did my research, found a place, and called. After speaking with the school, I found out that I could actually pay for everything, mostly with grants, and supplement a bit with student loans. I applied to the school, and was accepted. Bob agreed to drive me up to the school, and get me settled in some housing for the students. In a complete surprise to me, when we got there, Bob handed me $500 to tide me over until my student loans were dispersed. From that point forward, things kept getting better for me. I now have a wife and a son. I make a great living, and I owe it all to that man. I kept in close contact with him up until he passed in 2003. To this day, I do whatever I can to help the homeless and less fortunate. I do it in the memory of Bob and what he did for me. Story 10. I was a student on a commuter campus, so I made sure my boss knew I was up for any extra hours he had available, and on the off days I spent the entire day in the library on campus. I was homeless for 51 days that semester, and I got a 4.0 GPA, and had extra cash for a security deposit on an apartment from working the extra hours. Story 11. Homeless on and off for years. Growing up, for clarity, my mom was doing meth, and my dad is an abusive ex-Marine turned prison guard who has tried to be a cop. I was the outcome of a night at the bar. I would walk all across town during the day, staying with friends when possible, sleeping at the gazebo at the local park in the summer, and using our local rec room pool. I was lucky enough to go to a very poor school, so everyone got free breakfast lunch. I got set up to work at McDonald's through a schoolwork program at 14, and got screwed over. They said the school was supposed to pay me. School said they were, then finally moved back in with my mom. Me and my younger brother have done a lot of odd jobs and stupid things over the years. We both have been affected by it in different ways and have our vices, but for the most part we would be kicked out of the house and only really be homeless for a month or so at a time. My brother recently started doing meth. I ate dinner with him last night and he told me, yeah, we did ecstasy the other day. It didn't make me trip like I thought, which maybe I didn't do enough cause it just kinda sped me up. Then we did some Adderall because we couldn't get coke, and we got a guy selling us shrooms, so I'm gonna do that probably this next weekend. I found good resources in here, but honestly one of the worst advice you can give to a kid that I constantly see is join the military. Most homeless teens are only homeless for a short while, and they're at an age where making a friend to crash with or finding a party house isn't hard. In my area, if you can afford alcohol or weed once a week, you've got a place to stay pretty much. Also, don't do drugs if you're homeless. That's beyond stupid. If you need a job, apply at restaurants and talk to the chef. A lot of us in the kitchen have been through this and will be sympathetic, especially if it's not a fancy restaurant. You'll find work if you look, and it's never too late to rebuild or go to school. I'm 22 looking to start college next year, and so many people started later than you will. Being homeless just makes you more hardened to any big life events. IMO. Story 12. I was homeless by choice for a few months. I had money for a hotel room, but was too cheap to want to spend the money for it. I worked nights, so I slept days. I had shower facilities at my workplace that I used. I had a 4x4 vehicle and found a vacant field to drive into and parked in under a copse of trees to hide during the day so I could sleep. Sleeping in the heat of summer was miserable. Note: on my days off from work, I'd get a cheap hotel room for one day night as a kind of reward. Something to look forward to. Edit: I wasn't down and out. I had a life savings, just no place to live, and didn't want to spend $40 a day on motel rooms. Story 13. Homeless twice, going on 3 times. Primarily work. I was lucky enough to be juggling 2 jobs at the time from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and I hit the lottery by having one of them be in a gym. I would finish my shift, shower, then head to a sit-down coffee shop, the library, or a casual restaurant and pull out my laptop until closing. On weekends, more library, more coffee shops, sometimes just sitting around in public places observing. I strolled around on my favorite walking trails, hung out in the backs of bars, mingled with city crowds going nowhere in particular. Then of course at night, I had my own little nook in my car and curled up under a streetlight with a book until I passed out. Story 14. Got sober, had a job as a janitor, stayed at men's shelter, saved money for rent and deposit, went to JR college for free for a year, became diesel tech certified, now I make double min wage. Story 15. Not me, but my mother, when she was homeless as a child, late 70s, early 80s, she, her brother, and her sister would spend all day walking around the city. They would go to all the grocery stores, offer to take people's groceries to their cars for a quarter, and then go and buy their breakfast lunch, usually a Little Debbie snack and a Coke. They made friends with an old homeless man named Bill who would occasionally give them $1 or $2 for food and ask where their mother was. Whenever they weren't looking for food, they would go to the train yard, hop on a train, hop off when it started getting dark, and get on the next one that looked like it was headed back to the city. At night they'd find their mom, at a bar or on some corner, and they'd either couch surf or find an abandoned building to squat in. It's funny because when she would tell me these stories, there's a ton more. As a child, I thought it sounded like a cool adventure, like something from the Boxcar Children, but as an adult it sends shivers down my spine. Luckily, because their mother never sent them to school, my mom and her siblings were sent to foster care when she was 9. She's the reason I work for CYS now. Story 16. Work. After work, eat, gym, shower, and back to my car. Worst part was waking up at 4 a.m. muscles sore and cold, but the important thing is while this was happening the banks were being bailed out. Never forget what the priorities are. Story 17. I got off the streets about 3 months ago, but was homeless off and on for the last 2 years. Really hot or cold days were spent in the public library, nights in a local 24-hour lobby McDonald's. Nice days I spent in the local park. Luckily I had a car, so I didn't have to carry all my around. I didn't actually look homeless. Story 18. When me and my brother were homeless, we spent a lot of time at the library filling out applications, grocery stores for food and a bathroom, and gas stations for the microwave. That's why no matter what you should have a car to move around in. It's like a small mobile home if need be. Story 19. Often I would be at the local university to get inside for a while, or there were homelessness services I would go visit. I spent a few hours a day cleaning whatever place I'd been allowed to stay, and applying for jobs. Honestly, most of my time was spent walking around the city, because I didn't want to waste money on the bus. I did manage to get a job, just a crappy MLM thing. So once that started, I was knocking on the doors all day of people who did have houses. Really not the best job for a homeless person's mental state. Edit: I forgot to say the obvious, which is that there were a lot of days where I spent all day figuring out where I would sleep that night, and that pretty much every day, fetching food would take up a lot of my time. Story 20. I traveled. To be honest, I was a hitchhiker, but I didn't have a home, so I was just a hitchhiking homeless guy. I usually just found a spot somewhere to hang out during the day. It greatly varied. Could be a local campground, could be someone's couch, could be on the street corner panhandling or busking, etc. Most of my time though I traveled to remote places, and so most of my days I was nowhere near people, and usually out camping. Like I always traveled on the dirt roads or lonely county highways. Very rarely did I use the interstates, and I avoided big cities, usually passed through only small towns and secret gatherings. Story 21. While I was homeless and addicted to drugs, during my time on the street, I was sleeping on the street. It's safer to sleep during the day, especially as a woman. Then I would be up at night. I would do as much drug-related activity as I could between first light and around 10 a.m. so I could sleep until it got dark again. Story 22. Slept in the woods. I ended up with scraps of clothing and blankets and found a small rocky spot off the little beaten path. I worked night shift, so I slept pretty deep. Story 23. I stayed mostly at the shelter, or I would be taking appointments to get myself onto welfare, or into rent-geared to income housing. Occasionally I would go out for walks, or to the library, but mostly I stayed put. I was always afraid I'd either lose my bed, or miss a call that I was finally ready to get an apartment. Story 24. I scrapped up enough money to sell meth, shared a room with a hooker and her pimp at the cheapest motel in Baton Rouge, got into rehab and now have 20 months clean from all drugs, don't even smoke cigarettes anymore. Story 25. Can't speak for myself, but a friend of mine was homeless for a while. He worked 2 jobs but lived in a van parked at a Walmart because the cheapest rent in the area was $1,400 a month, which got you a small room that had your bed, kitchen, toilet, and shower all in the same room. I think he was making 10 to 13 an hour too. He moved since then to another part of the country and found a better job at a startup paying $29 an hour with benefits. Story 26. I was homeless for about a week in 2008 to 2009. I would ride my bike around places, looking for cheap meals, avoiding contact with people that would saw me as a menacing guy. I'm somewhat big, so people tends to be afraid of me. Every day I would take a shower in a gas station used by truck drivers. Then by night, I would go to some railroad station to sleep, having my bike secure at the station office thanks to a kind chief officer. By the end of that week I had enough money to move to a hotel and restart my life. It wasn't an enjoyable situation, but I learned some valuable lessons. Story 27. I usually slept at a friend's house during the day, while my friends were at school and parents were at work, then would drink coffee all night in a local diner. Unemployment was 13 in my city, at the time, but I looked for work every day, until a Wendy's manager told me, I just want to give you a heads up. We have gotten so many applications in the last 6 months, that we are only hiring people with degrees. At this point, I gave up and signed up for trade school right before I was given housing. Through a homeless youth program, I was on that waiting list for 6 months. I only ever slept outside maybe 3 times. I luckily had a lot of people trying to help. Story 28. I slept in my truck during the night and during the day. I worked as a home health aide for a woman who was quadriplegic. It was in 1993 and I made $300 a month working 10 to 12 hours a day 7 days a week. I lived in my truck for 10 months that year. I showered at a friend's house every few days and would go to a convenience store near closing time to buy the old stuff in the deli case they were about to toss. I could get 4 or 5 dried out hot dogs for $1, add some free mustard packets and dip it in some water and they would go down okay. Story 29. Honestly, I waited for it to get dark so I could steal. I'm not proud, just honest. I broke in vacant houses and stole copper and the like. I tried to rationalize that the bank owned the house and wouldn't miss whatever it was I was taking. Low point obviously. I never robbed anyone or even owned a gun tbh. In the daytime I slept in my friend's truck. He worked days. Never knew. Neighbors knew me and never batted an eye. This was about a 7 to 8 month period that spanned winter, spring and summer. Summer and winter obviously sucked, but spring was a sweet spot. I pretty much slept 2 to 4 hours a day during this span, with darkness completely reserved for survival. I was about 23 to 24 with no parents or anyone to call for help. Not to mention I was absolutely embarrassed about being homeless. Plus I'm fat so nobody ever thinks I'm missing meals, which I did, a lot. Eventually I got a job as a temp and turned it into a supervisor job. I don't go out of my way most of the time, but usually if someone asks me for change and I have it I give it to them. You never know. I once was given $5 and it was like the best day ever. You never know how much something so small can mean to someone. If you have extra blankets in your home you should wash them and give them away. Goes a lot further than a meal IMO. Story 30. Not me but a friend. He was 36, he had a job where I worked but chose to be homeless. Interesting guy. He would get a gym membership to a 24-hour gym. He would sleep in his car but use the gym to work out, watch TV, use the internet and shower, sometimes crash on their couch. Our job had free food and free internet and he would hang around a lot even when he wasn't working. I offered to let him crash in my basement but he refused. He wasn't poor and wasn't recovering from a bad life event. He just chose to be homeless. He saved a ton of money. Story 31. Rotated around between a few different libraries, all close to each other because some were university libraries. As long as you are clean and quiet, no one notices or cares. That plus the park and work too. Story 32. University. I was on university scholarships, kept up insanely good grades and went to class during the day, basically lived on campus and hung out in the library writing papers and applying for jobs, kept my stuff in my gym locker. When that closed I alternated between staying in a house that was a heroin den. I was not on heroin. I got raped there at one point though, so stopped going back and sleeping in the woods near the school. I set an alarm for 5 a.m. so I could get up before joggers came around. I was depressed all the time because of my situation, and was basically drunk every waking moment. I put cheap vodka in a bottle and even bring it to class with me. Lasted about a year total before I made enough from part-time jobs writing other students' essays to get a room with a roommate. I'm doing very very well now. That seems like a distant nightmare. Story 33. I was homeless back in 1997 at the age of 17. I worked 40 to 50 hours a week in this junkyard for 25 hours, but I couldn't rent a cheap hotel because I was underage. I slept in my unregistered car that I bought for $100 in the parking lot at work for a while. Eventually, the owner let me sleep in an old camper in the yard. I made it as comfortable as I could. I even had a pet cat. On weekends I drank a lot, but during the week I just worked. I became friends with the other employees and this one guy had an uncle that owned a trailer park. I eventually rented one from him, then bought one from him, sold it a few years later and used that for a down payment on a house. Married for almost 18 years now with 3 kids. Just bought a new car a few months ago and that was awkward, but cool at the same time. Story 34. Tomorrow is my last day of being homeless, thank God. Luckily me and my fiancé have a car so we usually just park at the trailhead and watch YouTube on our phones. Or we hang out at the mall. Our friend lets us come over all the time so we hang out there. and then we go to relax and sleep at the Walmart parking lot. I'm so ready to have a home.